This is TWiT.
Apple's CEO Tim Cook and Jeff Williams, COO, have apparently overruled Apple's design division. This is according to Mark Gurman. Against the wishes of the company's design team, they're going to release the first generation VR headset this year. This is the Financial Times, not Mark Gurman. Sorry. The timing of, I'll say it like the Times would. The timing of the mixed reality headset's launch has apparently been a cause of considerable contention at Apple. The company's industrial design team cautioned, devices in the category were not yet ready for launch and wanted to delay until a lightweight AR glasses product had matured several years from now. Tim said, no. Apple's operations team wanted to ship an early version in the form of a VR-focused ski goggle-like headset, probably to get developers on board. There's also rumors that this first one, which will be probably announced in June at WWDC, will cost upwards of $3,000. Interesting. Speaking to the Financial Times, former Apple engineers who worked on the device described the huge pressure to ship. Glenn, you cover Apple. This is unusual for Apple, I think, to have this kind of dissent within the ranks. No,
well, for us to hear about it, I think.
They're usually really tight on leaks. I'm wondering whose agenda is being carried out with this story is my question.
When you get this much information out there.
Yeah. Well, maybe I could see if you really thought this should not be released. Yeah. I don't want to have anything to do with it. You might go to the Financial Times and say, look, guys, this isn't ready for prime time. You might reasonably say users should not pay $3,000 for this, and I want them to know.
Does it mention in the story who this is for? Like, who do they think? Yeah. No, who do they think is going to pay $3,000 for this, and what are they using it for? Does it mention that anywhere in the story?
The only thing they said is the company's expecting to sell only 1 million units during the first year.
Yeah.
To whom for what,
all
though?
the developers, right?
Yeah. I don't know. There's going to be a point. I am very uninterested in VR. I mean, it's sort of both personally, but I think also I don't believe substantial use case has been found outside gaming, and even then, it's got what feels like a continued limited use case. Yeah. So AR, but I mean, as a broad consumer applicable technology that could sell eventually hundreds of millions of units.
I don't think it's consumer. I think there's a lot of industrial applications.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there are compelling uses that they're so niche they don't talk about them. Yeah. There's tremendous things you could do with it from a design and
that's the also ran. That's Google Glass. Yeah. That's Google saying, well, they're still used in industry. That's
it's a segue. Remember the segue was it's going to transform transportation everywhere. And it's like, no, but it's really great in warehouses and for meter
and
readers.
For security people and
right.
Well, it's the same thing with like Microsoft HoloLens. Like my favorite,
also a flop.
Well, my favorite use case for that is NASA.
Yeah, but look at the Army, which spent $1 billion and decided not to use it.
Yeah,
because nobody wanted to wear it. It was making people vomit.
I'm totally excited about AR, though, and I have been jumping up and down about AR for years, and it's the less sexy partner, but I'm like, anything that does an overlay of the world. So my wife is deaf in one ear, and she uses a bone-anchored hearing aid, which is paired with her phone, and so she has the superpower of being able to listen to music in her head, right, through Bluetooth, and take calls in her head. And I'm like, I want this augmentation. Like, it's great when it's a supplement, when it helps somebody. And I look at AR as an incredible combination of supplementation for people who need it and augmentation as a tool for the elderly, maybe for the young, for people in all kinds of industries, but also just as a daily life thing. I could see the utility of augmented reality enhancing what I do already.
I can take your wife's point of view because I'm good looking in my head. I
can hear how good looking you are in my head.
Yeah, in my head, I'm really smart.
I was really surprised. Well, I was really surprised when I discovered that one of my favorite use cases for my Apple Watch is when I'm in a strange city and my wrist buzzes to tell me when to turn left or right while I'm walking. Because
that's augmented reality, isn't it?
Yeah, because this way I'm not hauling out a map. I'm not looking at a phone. I can just go quick glance down. I don't look obviously touristy, which can be a concern in some places. I'm still stuck on this Apple thing. I'm stuck on who is this for and what are they doing with it? Like,
well, that sounds like
I kind of don't care about the Palace intrigue. What I'm more interested in is if you're selling 1 million of these things, to whom? Why? What's about to happen?
Why did Tim Cook do it? And the headline for Patrick McGee and Tim Bradshaw at the Financial Times is Tim Cook bets on Apple's mixed reality headset to secure his legacy.
I don't know. This all sounds kind of. I mean, there've been so many leaks and stories for the last several years about Apple's on the verge of this and that. Yeah. We know they have 1 million things going on in the lab, and for all we know, this is Tim Cook gives the go-ahead to spend another $500 million on this over the next 5 years and not take it to market this year. I would not eat a augmented reality, virtual reality headset if I'm wrong, but I mean, John Gruber goes into this in great detail and very very amusingly. Is like everything is so ugly. Apple's not going to release an ugly headset until it looks like something Apple would release. It will not come out, and so I think that's a huge.
Wait, so you think it won't come out? You think actually this thing isn't going to come out this year?
I don't think it's a real thing. I don't think the hardware power combined with battery life and compact size, unless it'd have to be such a niche thing, there's no way they could sell 1 million of it. I could see them having an early developer's kit that was not designed to be mobile, that was actually designed to be anchored to a Studio Mac or a similarly powerful Mac. So Apple has done that before, where they've released hardware early to developers. That's an advanced look at 6 months, a year, sometimes longer. So I can see them saying this is our hardware technology preview to give developers a chance for something that's coming in the future, and we're going to sell this to developers essentially on loan for X months, which is
so this is interesting.
The model of that.
So you disagree? You think the Financial Times is wrong, saying that they're going to come out with that this year?
I don't have the sources, but it doesn't pass my smell test.
Yeah.
I wrote about this a while ago, Glenn, and I actually came to the same conclusion without having the sourcing. But I thought that the AR headset was definitely not going to happen anytime soon, and they would probably shelve the VR headset as well. And I've been really surprised to read these stories saying that it's definitely coming out, because for all the reasons that you outlined. But I do, and I think AR, like an AR glasses, in the sense that like they look like normal glasses, is a great. I mean, that's a great product.
But the technology doesn't exist, is the problem.
There, and I looked into this. I went really deep on this years ago. I did this story on Magic Leap and what they were actually trying to build, and it turned out they weren't. It was sort of like they don't have it. Was the conclusion. And I talked to all these people in the industry. I talked to people who had worked on the HoloLens, for instance, which I agree is an amazing piece of technology, but it was never it just wasn't the form factor that was going to take off for consumers. People who worked on the HoloLens told me like AR is just never going to happen. And I'm like, never? And like, never. It's just, it isn't possible. And I think there is something to it. I think we've gotten so used to technology sort of progressing on this predictable exponential scale with Moore's law that we forget sometimes that like there are actual challenges to the physical world, like for instance, getting light from somewhere over here into my eyes. And it's hard.
Well, okay. Do you agree, Lisa? You think Apple will not ship anything this year?
I do think there's a very strong point to be made that so much of Apple...
That they shouldn't.
Well, but it was about... There's so much of their corporate identity and so much of their price point justification comes around how well they nail aesthetics and design. Yeah. Because when you pay for an Apple product, you are effectively paying for the design experience.
They don't want to release a Google Glass or even a HoloLens.
So... Again, a lot of this story feels like Palace intrigue to me, and I'm wondering if...
Mark Gurman also thinks they're going to release it this year. He said the same thing.
I just don't.
He didn't have the internal conflict.
How does it fit? What we know about Apple is we know that they've been pivoting more and more of the revenue towards subscription services, towards recurring, repeating revenue. Right? Like this has been talked up in almost every quarterly call where they're talking about, we have this many more subscribers for Apple TV. Apple Music is coming along, repeating services, steady stream of revenue. Their hardware is moving to a point where it supports these steady sources of revenue. This isn't to diminish the fact that they still sell boatloads of phones and tablets and watches and computers, but they're looking at a different revenue mix. And the other question I have no answer to based on this story is, where does that headset fit into their plan to lock you into recurring monthly revenue? Like what product or service do they have that this headset amplifies or extends the user experience on? Or what service are they planning on putting out? Because right now I don't understand who this is for. I don't understand how this sets up an opportunity to bring back repeat customers for upgrades, especially if it's $3,000. You can buy like 2 MacBook Airs for that.
Yeah.
And
so this is an interesting.
Use them as clamshell maracas, and you'd probably have a more rewarding user experience.
I am saving this clip, and we're gonna we get to December 31st, 2023, and there has been no VR headset. You guys are gonna get big gold stars. I mean, everybody and their brother says Apple's doing this. If Apple does go ahead, if this FT story is true, and Tim Cook's gonna force it, is it a flop?
It's just everybody wants Apple to have the next big thing, and I think
including Apple.
There's a media focus around it outside of the sort of I would say people who cover Apple and technology media, people who actually understand this. It's not to insult other reporters, but people would like a narrative that Apple has a new big thing every X year, like the iPhone. They had the iPhone. They had the iPad, they had the watch. And it's like, yeah, but each of those is a refinement of a different kind of idea around the same subject. So they're not going to have a thing that changes a category and becomes a multi-billion-dollar item every 3 or 4 years. What if Apple never had, and I say never, like in 20 years from now, Apple never had a product-defining category like the iPhone, iPad, or watch, which was an existing category again? What if it's feasible? Will they be still going to be worth $20 trillion in 2043?
But speaking of the next category, I mean, it seems like AI is turning out to be this new, the new platform.
Much to the chagrin of Meta, which has pushed its chips in on VR. Microsoft has pivoted. Microsoft was thinking HoloLens was going to be it. Now they're all about AI.
No, they had both things going on. Like I went up to Redmond shortly before the pandemic and spent 2 days in analyst and press briefings, and literally a day and a half was us talking to different people, from their researchers to their business intelligence team to their Azure team, talking about what they were doing with AR, all the way down from the level of here's how we're looking at how we collect training data and how to detect bias or how to identify good data versus bad data, all the way up to here's how we're going to build out a suite of tools so that people can augment and extend the way they use data, up to here are the assistive bots and whatnot we're going to have. Like, they've been working on this for a couple years already. Like, the ChatGPT partnership is opportunistic.
Apple's been working on VR for 7 years, according to FT.
Yeah, but physics is not
7 years ago.
7 years is like nothing, basically, in mechanical engineering and physics. Like Reed was saying, you have to take into account like the realities of the physical world. And it's super easy to do stuff on a phone because the phone is a super closed environment in a lot of ways. It's small, it's held in your hand, you download things to it, you just need a network connection. Like VR is you in a bunch of wildly variable physical spaces with God knows what kind of connectivity.
But Reed, didn't we think the iPhone was going to be a flop? And we've seen this. There's no way this
I was going to say, I was going to say that I think when everybody knew Apple was coming out with a phone and they had this idea in their head of like, basically like an iPod that could make phone calls, right? Mm-hmm. And it turned out that they had this touchscreen interface that was so revolutionary. And I think there is a chance that they have some trick up their sleeve with this VR headset that makes it, cool or interesting in some way. Maybe the resolution or the screen is so I guess the display technology is so good that you could just spend all day in this thing, right? I mean, that's the big limitation now with Meta. It's like you don't want to be in there more than a half an hour to an hour, right? And I think if they have some way of making it so that you could sit and do work on this thing and have like, your graphics all over around you, and I don't know. I mean,
just imagine if they come out with this in like March 2020, Apple accidentally ships a VR goggle system that has to be plugged in to an existing computer. They would have sold 1 billion of them. Didn't matter how bulky it was, how ugly it was, could have had primitive graphics, and they would have made another $1 trillion.
To embroider a little bit on Reed's insight, one of the reasons the iPhone took off is it was very fundamentally social because you could take photos and you could message people, and it turned into, again, like the computer you keep in your pocket, and shifted how we understand computing and how it's innately a social activity. And VR, if they're going to do VR and make it a social thing where you want to hang out and spend time because you're having communal experiences or you're having a meeting or something, that could be the killer app. I don't know how they'd do it.
Do you think we would have...
I don't work at Apple.
Do you think we knew, though, what those synergies would be in 2007 when the iPhone
I just thought they had a great browser. I was like, I had just come off in 2006 trying... Yeah, I tried every smartphone available for that with any kind of Mac thing in 2006 for Macworld Magazine, and was like, wow, these all stink. Nothing's good. They're all using WAP, or they have their Nokia was the best thing out there. And then January 2007 rolls around, go into a briefing in San Francisco, and Apple says, sure, you can play with it. And you're like, right, pinch, expand, browse. I'm like, okay, this is it. Because people just wanted to, I mean, this is what is fundamentally weird to me about technology, and everyone like, oh, we need NFTs, Web3, AR, whatever. Like, people want to browse, they want to send email, they want to write a document. That is most usage. And gaming is this much broader, but like inchoate boundary thing. So it's like the iPhone did all those things. So everything else has been an extra bonus on top of that.
Admittedly, it would be hitting the jackpot. It would be amazing.
Yeah.
But they did it before in 2007, and I think that's why people are saying, well, maybe there is some secret sauce that Apple could add to VR.
Well, I think one of the gifts
if not, they got a flop on their hands, and that's not good. This is a big...
one of the things that Apple does well, though, is it puts together a beautifully designed thing that does XYZ, and then people still find stuff to do with it that expands its market and its utility.
Same thing for Twitter, right?
Well,
they didn't know all the things you were
it did it with the phone, because again, once you're like, ooh, I have something where I can talk to people, I can take photos, I can send photos.
Every great tech product, that's been the secret to its success.
Because here's the thing.
We didn't know we were going to be able to use VisiCalc on our Apple IIs.
To get back to the Apple thing for a minute there, what and this is purely this was actually covered in the New York Times a couple months ago, and I can corroborate it with anecdata. I don't want my kid to have a phone yet. I don't want her to have untrammeled. I don't want her to have untrammeled access to the internet. I don't want her to have untrammeled access to social media. But I do want to encourage independence and let her run around the island with her friends.
You're at a very difficult time right now because she's on the edge of innocence, and you want to keep her there.
Well, Apple Watch has been great though, because we got to watch we got to watch where
the kid feature, so you could
she can
set
call
it up.
us. She can call us and
solves the problem.
And it's on a parent
and you
thing.
know where she is.
And all of her friends have it, so she's got group chats with her friends. She doesn't feel like she's missing out socially. She gets that autonomy and independence, and we get what are effectively
That's
training
just
wheels.
Lucky though that there was an intermediate device at work.
But that's the thing is Apple didn't design the watch for that.
They didn't know.
Yes. And it was pretty evident. They were like, we're doing this for health. We're doing this because it ties into the rest of the system. But people were like, okay, this does exactly what I need to do for this completely unanticipated
The watch is a great
scenario.
example because at first it was like a sidecar for your Apple. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And they slowly found, and it was different for everybody who used it, that sweet thing that...
Yeah.
So that serendipity is what Apple needs for this VR thing.
And that's the thing is if you can find that where there are the use cases and people, oh, this is fantastic. But if you can find that thing where people are like, oh, this actually fulfills a social or a vocational need in a way that's much more elegant than my current setup, like that is where you'll get your million headsets.
Here's a parenting tip too is we did this with my younger kid who's now almost 16, and they had a very simple phone that we basically left in the house. I know, and crazy, right? And we let them buy a watch, but they asked us to buy a watch. We let them use their own money from dog walking. So we gave them permission to spend their money. That's a parenting tip, just tell you. And worked great for a few years. Yeah.
I keep giving my kids Apple Watches or trying to, and iPads, and they don't want them. They don't want nothing to do with them.
I think so one killer app, like when you talked about this, like what is a killer? I mean, I'm looking over at my office now. I just got like monitors all over the place because I can never have enough screen real estate.
Imagine strapping those to your head, Reed. Life would be different.
Oh my God, the Iron Man dream, where like in all of the Marvel movies and they have all the...
See it all.
I absolutely want that. That would be amazing.
If you need monitors, right? Like if you could just put this thing on and you don't need a monitor anymore, like that alone is probably worth the money, right? Because I think so, because you could then you sort of like you have your workspace around you, and then
What if somebody sneaks up behind you and bonks you on the head?
You obviously you have a rear view mirror.
Oh, you have
too.
a rear view mirror.
Like that's got to be part of it too. Is the
that's your services. That's your services revenue right there. You pay for somebody to monitor your rear view camera. But I mean, if you could just take that thing off and then you have this nice clean desk and you could do whatever on that. I mean, I think that makes sense, but I am very skeptical that they have made that, because just based on the technology that's out there, it doesn't seem like it's not quite there yet. But I could be wrong.
Wow, this is great. This is the first time I've had a panel where they said, no, that's not going to happen. in the face of all of these articles from Gurman and the Financial Times and everybody else, no, that's not going to happen.
Oh, hey, that's a really nice iPhone you have there. You totally picked the right color. Hey, since you do use an iPhone and maybe use an iPad or an Apple Watch or an Apple TV, well, you should check out iOS Today. It's a show that I, Micah Sargent, and my co-host Rosemary Orchard host every Tuesday right here on the TWiT network. It covers all things iOS, tvOS, HomePodOS, watchOS, iPadOS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer, and we love to give you tips and tricks about making the most of those devices, checking out great apps and services, and answering your tech questions. I hope you check it out.